Hey guys, so when it comes to language learning, there are a ton of apps on the market, each claiming to be the ultimate solution for mastering a new language. And it's hard sometimes to know which one to choose, which means that we might end up choosing the most popular one, which might not necessarily fit our purpose or learning style. But not to worry, I tested 34 different apps with or without AI features, including some of the most popular ones as well as some you might never have heard of before. I evaluated them based on a number of criteria, and in this video I will walk you through the top candidates, breaking down their strengths, weaknesses, and which one might be the perfect fit for you. But first, let me quickly explain the criteria that I have used to evaluate these apps. Do keep in mind that this is a highly personal ranking, but it might still give you some ideas about what these apps can offer you. First was language proficiency and accuracy. Here I wanted to ensure that the app provides accurate vocabulary, grammar, and pronunciation. And by the way, I tested these apps on languages I already have some level of proficiency in. These include English, German, and Arabic. Then there is content variety, basically how many skills, situations, or topics the app covers. User experience is also important. I looked at how easy and enjoyable each app is to use. Is it intuitive, engaging? Do the features actually help you learn, or are they more of a distraction? And finally, learning methodology. And this is more about how the app teaches you the language. Does it rely on memorization, or does it use more immersion-like techniques? I wanted to make sure that the app's teaching style was effective and suited to different types of learners. Then for each app, I gave each of these criteria a score out of 10. And the apps that scored a total of 30 points or more were included in this list that will be discussed in this video. And by the way, none of the apps mentioned here are sponsoring this video. But let's jump right in. Let's start with a more popular one, which is Babbel. Babbel's content is designed by linguists focusing on high language accuracy. You have 14 languages to choose from, and in the beginning, it lets you choose up to 3 skills that you want to learn or improve, from grammar, vocabulary, conversation, listening, reading. First, let's discuss the good about this app. I found that the pronunciation was pretty good and definitely curated by natives, especially in languages like German. And the app's teaching style is designed so that you have lessons that you go through, and in the beginning it lets you choose the correct answer. Then the new words or grammar are repeated, where you have to type the whole word or just parts of it. Now, between the apps I've tested, I found that this has the best grammar practice, where you have to type in the correct form of the verb and so on, instead of just tapping or choosing from a list. Then during the lessons, there are always cultural or grammar tips popping on the screen, which is quite nice. Overall, the app has a nice and clean interface, conducive to focused learning, free of distractions. You get access to material for free, which is really great. But as always, some of the best features are reserved for people who actually choose a subscription plan, which I think is fair in the end. And if you are serious about learning a new language, then I would test a new app first, just for a while, see if you like it, and then you can choose whether to pick a subscription plan, and you can always cancel whenever you want. I personally subscribe to services that I use frequently and get a lot of value of, for example, like ChatGPT. So personally, I think it's worth subscribing where it makes sense. Now let's talk about the bad aspects of the app. I found it perhaps a bit too easy, at least for German. It had lessons up to level B2, and I found that it was too easy for B2. Most lessons consisted of tapping the new answer, where you have to choose between 2 or maximum 3 answers. And then after a while, you get to type the answers instead of just choosing them. Now, this is fair and actually great for beginners. But once you reach higher levels of the language, for example, in my case, I'm trying to learn German at level C1, where I might want some more depth and more comprehensive material. It's also important to note that it cannot correct your pronunciation. Like, I said something completely random in a non-language, and it actually accepted it as the correct answer. So if you want to practice your pronunciation, I'd rather choose an AI-based app, which will be the next one. But first, let me tell you how I rate this app. When it comes to language proficiency and accuracy, I would give it 9.5 out of 10. For content variety, I would give it 9 out of 10. For user experience, I would give it 9 out of 10 as well. I think the interface is really clean and easy to navigate. And for learning methodology, I would give it 8 out of 10. The next app is Langua. I think that's how it's pronounced. It is a great conversation practice AI-powered platform. It uses very realistic and natural sounding voices that sound very native. Here you can choose one of many ways to practice conversation through, for example, role play or debate, which really forces you to think about how to express your thoughts in your target language. You can select multiple languages that you want to practice and switch between them easily.
مرحباً. هل توافق على أن الطاقة النووية آمنة ومستدامة؟ ولماذا؟
What I found really impressive is that it's able to highlight cultural nuances, slangs, and just immerse you in the culture in a way that feels very real somehow. There are a variety of activities that you can do here, from chatting with AI, grammar practice, podcasts, videos, learning vocabulary through flashcards, and even using your collected words to generate stories based on them. Especially in Arabic, I found that the pronunciation is great and really made by native voices. It has error detection features in the grammar section of the app. It explains to you exactly what are the mistakes that you made and what's the correct way to say it and why. Another great feature is that you can always translate on the spot if you get stuck, or say it in your native language and then it translates it into the language that you are trying to learn, just to keep the conversation going. In summary, I think that it really stood out to me for the unique approach that it takes to language learning, where you have to really actively interact with the material and produce sentences yourself instead of just tapping or choosing from a limited number of options. And there is actually a lot of content that you can go through for free before hitting a limit. Now let's talk about the bad things about this app. The first thing is that it's not able to correct your grammar during a conversation or a debate. It only can do that inside the grammar section of the app. And the second thing, which might not be a big deal, it's that it's only a desktop-based app, so there's no mobile app as far as I know, yet at least. Now for the rating, I would give it a 9 out of 10 for language proficiency and accuracy, 9.5 out of 10 for content variety, and for the user experience, I would give it 9 out of 10. For the learning methodology, I really enjoyed it, so I would give it 9.5 out of 10. But then again, I'm a big AI fan, so... And by the way, if you are like me and you are always trying to cram your language learning after a day of work or university, then you might be struggling sometimes to muster the energy to do it. And there are many natural ways to boost your energy, for example, by getting good sleep, by eating good food, but also my favorite matcha-based shots from Magic Mind, full of natural ingredients that enhance your focus. Focus? Hopefully focus. I personally do notice a difference in my ability to sustain focus and energy on the days that I do consume them compared to when I don't. So I would highly recommend that you give them a try, and if they don't work for you, you can always just email Magic Mind and ask them for a complete refund, no questions asked. The next app is TalkPal. It is similar to Langua with a slightly nicer user interface. Here again, the focus is on improving conversation skills and critical thinking in your language of choice, whether through role plays, debates, descriptive tasks. But it differs in that, as far as I have tried it, it will always correct you when you make mistakes, whether in grammar or just weird sentence structures. So in any conversation that you would have with it, whether it's a voice conversation or just by typing, it will be able to spot your mistakes. The advantage here is that you can practice both speaking and writing, because you can choose whether you want to practice only with voice or only with writing. As for the bad aspects about this app, the saddest thing is that most of the content is locked behind subscription. But the good news is you can always get a 2-week free trial, and then if you like it, you can subscribe for something like $10 per month or something like that, which I think it's quite reasonable, but also depends on your purpose. And the other thing is that it does not have a dedicated grammar practice, at least for the moment. It will always correct your grammar if you make mistakes, but you cannot go and intentionally practice grammar. So I would give it an 8.5 out of 10 for language proficiency and accuracy. For content variety, I would give it 8 out of 10. User experience, 9 out of 10. And learning methodology, 9 out of 10. But perhaps it's not very beginner friendly. Next up we have Busuu. Is that how you pronounce it? Busuu? Busuu offers up to 12 different languages and levels up to B2 or upper intermediate. The good thing about it is that it has an easy to navigate user interface, it has great pronunciation clearly made by natives, and one nice feature I found is that it has a review section where it collects the parts that you were weak at, whether they were words or grammar, where you can go back to them and practice them. Most of the content of the app is aimed at complete beginners up to maybe A2 level. It gives very detailed tips and explanations, for example, grammar explanations, which appear as pop-ups during lessons. It seems to me that it tries to mimic a language learning textbook. So you have these chapters that you go through, and then for each chapter a certain topic is introduced, for example dining, and then you learn vocabulary related to that topic, and grammar is introduced, and so on. I think for German level B2 it had up to 13 chapters, which is I guess the equivalent of a language learning textbook. But every now and then you have to watch an ad unless you upgrade to premium. Now, the bad aspects. I think that the content was way too easy, at least for German for upper intermediate B2. And you can only tap correct answers or rearrange sentences, which not ideal. However, in Arabic, I felt that the content was more appropriate for an advanced level. You know, in Arabic, the leveling system is different than languages, for example, like English and German, where you have these levels A1, A2, B1, B2, and so on. And the other bad aspect is that there is not really much variety. You cannot practice, for example, grammar specifically or vocabulary. You have always to go through these lessons, and then the related grammar or words are introduced during the lesson. In Arabic, it teaches the language through a combination of transliteration and native script. Now, I am not a big fan of transliteration, which means that you use English script or Roman script to be correct, to write down how words would sound. I think that you cannot really properly learn the language without the script. And it's very susceptible to mispronunciation, especially in Arabic, where there are some unique sounds that do not exist in other languages. So if you are learning Arabic, I would not recommend it specifically. But if you are learning other languages, especially English and German, I think that the lessons are quite good, and the grammar tips are comprehensive and explain the grammar rather nicely. So I would give it an 8.5 out of 10 for language proficiency and accuracy, a 7 out of 10 for content variety, and 8 out of 10 for user experience, and a 7.5 out of 10 for learning methodology. Next is RosettaStone, and this is one of the more popular apps. It offers up to, I think, 25 different languages. It focuses on immersive learning and avoids translations, emphasizes correct pronunciation and contextual understanding. So it tries to mimic how children acquire a language through context and repetition. So let's talk about the good aspects. Pronunciation is great. It's really spot on, especially for Arabic, and it's clearly made by natives. A nice feature is that it's able to catch incorrect pronunciation 75% of the time, but not always. It's a highly visual learning based app. So if that's your preferred learning style and you are a complete beginner, then you might want to take a look at it. It has some really high quality learning material for beginners. Great listening exercises. You can listen to stories or read them. You can record yourself reading them and then play the recording, and so on. Now, regarding the bad aspects, there are no clear levels. You learn at all levels, and perhaps, like I said, it's better suited for beginners up to maybe lower intermediates. There didn't seem to be dedicated grammar practice or even any detailed grammar explanations of any sort. For most of the content, you need to pay, and you can only use the app in landscape mode, which I personally don't prefer. So I would give it a 9 out of 10 for language accuracy and proficiency, 7 out of 10 for content variety, 7.5 for user experience, and 8 out of 10 for learning methodology. Now, what about if you wanted to practice vocabulary and nothing else? My personal favorite was Clozemaster, where you can learn vocabulary in a context through sentence-based learning. If you have been on this channel before, then you know that I'm not a big fan of flashcards, and I prefer learning vocabulary in a context. I find that, at least for me personally, this is the most effective method for long-term retention and effective learning. The app is based on fill-in-the-blanks exercises, with some gamification elements like points and scores and stuff like that. You can choose between 50 different languages or even more than 50. And in addition to vocabulary practice, you can also work on your grammar, which can help you improve your understanding of sentence structure and grammar, which is kind of cool to combine together with vocabulary practice. So I would rate it a 9 out of 10 for language proficiency and accuracy, a 9 out of 10 for content variety, and 8 out of 10 for user experience, since I am not a big fan of the user interface. And I would give it a 9 out of 10 for learning methodology. Now, it is important to keep in mind that apps are a great supplement for language practice, but I personally would not use them alone to learn a new language. I think we need different sources of input to cement and solidify our understanding of the language. So what do you guys think? Are you using any of these apps, or are you planning to? Are you a fan of language learning apps to begin with? Now, obviously, I cannot talk about AI-assisted language learning without mentioning my favorite app of them all, which is ChatGPT. It's not technically a dedicated language learning app, but you have to direct it a little bit on how it can help you to learn a language. I have already made a video on how you can do that using 10 great prompts. So if you haven't seen it yet, I highly recommend that you watch it, and I'll see you next time.